Assemblywoman Catharine Baker. She is the Vice Chairman of the Assembly of Higher Education Committee. In addition to committees on the transportation, businesses and professionalism, privacy and consumers protection, and the Joint Legislative Audit Committee. She is the mother of twins and involved in many more things that I could go on here for quite a while. I think people would rather listen to you speak. Catherine, please raise a round of applause.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. First of all, this group has got a great start to their morning, the music coming in, and also I noticed there's a very strict 2-drink minimum. And for your, which was strict, I mean that was double underscored. So I know it's a terrific group, and particularly realtors, you are on the front lines of what's happening in our state and our community, what people's are experiencing in their lives, what their needs are, what are some of the challenges in our community. So it's very valuable to me personally to get to visit with you this morning, and thank you for having me at the start of a Friday. I thought I would take a moment to talk about what I've been up to for the last year. December 1st, Tuesday, was the 1-year anniversary of my time in the State Assembly. And so thank you, happy birthday. So I guess I'm feeling a little bit nostalgic, and just thought it'd be good to visit a bit about what I've been up to, what's coming ahead in the coming year, and then also just stop talking and open up for any questions you have. That's some of them, and feedback and comments and priorities you'd like me to focus on. So December 1st was the first day I was serving in any elective office. I've been very active in our community for many years. I've lived in the East Bay for 17 years. Native Californian from outside of Palm Springs area, so a desert person, but I've been in the Bay Area now for many years. I live in Dublin, and I am a parent of 2 school-age kids. They are twins. I'm very efficient. I have a boy and a girl all at once, and get it done. And so it was something I've been very involved in our community for many years, mostly in our schools as a parent, the parents that you deal with, parents that you may be, how we are actively involved in many things in our community, but had not previously served in elective office. I do know that 20 years ago, I was a senior legislative advisor to Congressman Sonny Bono. He represented my hometown of Palm Springs many years ago, but anytime you can say 20 years ago I was doing XYZ, it's kind of makes you feel older. So, and it's been an extraordinary year. My first day, I learned a first lesson that I was proud of. Most members on their very first day introduce their first bill. Most freshman members, just to show something symbolic about what they're working on and what they think is their highest priority. And that sounded a little too gimmicky for me. And I instead did a first act. And that was to forego the $30,000 additional PERC payments that Assembly members receive and not take it. This is before I learned it was tax-free. I didn't tell my husband that part. But this is a payment that members are given that's intended to reimburse them for work they do when they're up in Sacramento. So just like you would reimburse someone in your office if they had to travel for work, stay overnight, or have meals during the day, and which is completely fine. The problem with that is that the legislative calendar is manipulated so you're paid when you're at home, in your own bed, and out working in your community and eating your own packed lunch. And it is to basically pad the payments that legislators receive. So I thought a whole bunch of people would do the same thing. And it didn't happen, but I was very proud that was my first act, was to give something back and forgo a PERC. I said no to the car. I drive a minivan, and I drop the kids off at school each day in Dublin and head up to Sacramento and come back at night. It's very important to get outside of that bubble, and it is a bubble. It's a little bit like I wouldn't say a fraternity party, but it's very much like a microcosm of a different world. So as soon as I start driving back on weeknights and I get to about the beginnings of Walnut Creek, which is the northern edge of my district, I feel like there's normal air and there's really oxygen again, and it's a good thing. But didn't take the car. I have everything I need in my car to live for about a week. And so that's kind of been my practice instead of staying in Sacramento. I've worked on 4 key areas this last year, and I've called them pillars because they are very foundational for what I think I said I would focus on when I ran for office and what I hope and think is a priority for our community. And it's to keep myself and my terrific team focused. Someone's always coming in and saying, can you have this program? Can you have them pay for it? And can you make it permanent? And some of it might sound very good. So it's extremely important to stay focused. Those 4 pillars are education. Education was originally the reason I ran for state assembly. And I just feel passionately about it. Certainly, there aren't a lot of members of the Assembly who have school-age children right now who are involved in school. It's a very first-hand experience. I'm the daughter of an award-winning California public school teacher. And so I definitely thank you. Shout out to our teachers and my mom. So education is a very key issue. And so that's a major pillar in what I focus on. Secondly is our infrastructure. By that I mean water and transportation. I probably don't have to convince anyone in this room the importance of our infrastructure and transportation in particular in our area. My district has 5 BART stations. If you don't have a parking space by 7:30, you're driving to work. It has 580 and the 580-680 interchange, 680, the main corridor between Pleasanton and Walnut Creek, the 24-680 interchange, and 24. These are major arteries for getting around in the East Bay and throughout the Bay Area. And if anyone is in the Bay Area and trying to connect to Interstate 5 or anywhere else in California through Interstate 5, which is the main artery of our state, you go through this district. You have to basically go 580. All the Port of Oakland traffic goes through our community. This is one of the busiest ports in the entire West Coast. And so transportation is a major issue. The frustration that families and individuals in our community are feeling every single day and the lack of investment that we have made in transportation. So that's a major issue, and certainly water. My dirty van and dead lawn, which has the mange now, there's green tufts of grass. Should we ever sell our home, I'm going to need some staging help in the yard. Are a testament to what we have as a challenge in water in our state. So these are 2 core issues that I strongly believe are an important state government responsibility and my focus. A third area is just a pro-jobs agenda, unabashedly pro-job. Imagine what it would be like if our state were totally open for business again and business friendly, and we're not. I know this from my background. My father and my Uncle Fred and grandfather ran a small family business together for over 40 years. It was office machinery. The big copiers, the printers, and when I was really, really little, like barely even born, typewriters. And we had about 15 to 19 employees, and I saw the challenges that the state was already beginning to have again and again throughout a good part of my adult life. And then I'm a lawyer in my other life, and thank you, shout out to the lawyers. See, now that's what you're here. I work mostly with small family businesses. I'm affiliated with Hoag Fenton Law Firm here in Pleasanton and have been for many years. And most of my practice was working with smaller family businesses. And if you think it's tough to be a business in California, add a family component to that. You go into business with your spouse or your kids, and it's a tremendous challenge. And I found that every day I was saying to clients, I know this is what you want to do. I'm going to help you find a solution. California's going to make it as difficult as possible for you. And let's see how we can navigate. So I just believe in a very pro-job agenda. What does that mean? It's easy for anyone to say that. For me, the focus really is flexibility. Our state has unbelievably rigid rules in just about every turn for businesses and nonprofits. Very inflexible work arrangements, very high penalties if you vary from them at all. And that's just not modern. That's a very industrial age way of looking at our world. One example is the 8-hour workday. California is one of only 4 states that rigidly insists on an 8-hour workday, as opposed to a 40-hour work week. What does this mean in terms of real practice? That means when someone works a 12-hour day in California, they will get overtime of 4 hours, even if they only work 12 hours the entire week. And I've had clients who wanted their business model to hire more moms who wanted to work outside the home 1 or 2 very long days a week and be home the rest of the time. California makes it ridiculously difficult to do that. And so I authored a bill that says, if the employee requests a more flexible schedule and the employer agrees, you can do it. You can have up to 10-hour days, up to 40-hour work weeks. And that did die in committee. I was told it was the most creative solution that they've seen in a while because the employee was the one to ask. In the past, such legislation has been the employer, and of course what they'll say is the employer is bad and is mean and is just trying to take advantage of employees. So pro-job agenda, mostly focusing on flexibility. There's a lot we can do in California to help create a better pro-job economy. And notice I don't just say pro-business, I do believe pro-job, because employees matter as well and need to have good arrangements in their communities. And the final pillar that I work on is not very sexy or spicy, but it's financial discipline. This is just keeping our state from going off a financial cliff at every opportunity we have, which is almost every day. Right now, for example, we have, I'm told, an $11 billion surplus. And there is an unbelievable appetite I see every day in the Capitol to spend it. And not just spend it on one-time investments, but long-term obligations that when our economy recedes, which it will through a cyclical process, we can't cut back. And so we slash our schools, we slash our local governments, police and fire, libraries, social services, and we go through this roller coaster cycle. And we have an unbelievable amount of debt, particularly in the pension area. That means people who've been expecting a pension won't have one, or we will totally decimate our government. And I'm for a very small government, but not decimated. So I say no a lot. And my kids will tell you I'm very good at that. It is important to do that. There are only a few areas where I say, okay, we need to do more investment, but before you ever spend more money on something, you have got to show me you are changing the way you're spending it. You're going to spend it better. You're going to reform what needs to be changed so we're not frittering away valuable resources. So those are some of the areas that I have been focused on this last year. Probably sounds like a long laundry list, but I do try to fit everything I do into those areas. My committees reflect that. I'm vice chair of the Higher Education Committee, which means I'm able to have an influence on K through 12 education so that they can prepare our students in California for a good higher education opportunity. In that area, I focus a lot on ensuring that our UC system puts California students first. Totally first over non-American students. And I'm very nativist in this way, because I do believe that our California university system should put California students first. And we've been over-relying on non-residents to charge them more. And I've been a leader at saying we're not doing this anymore, and we're going to have other solutions. And so higher education is an area I also focus a good deal on helping our veterans transition from active duty into higher education for their next adventure in life. We haven't done very much to help them do that. And one of my 4 bills this year that passed unanimously out of the Assembly and was signed by the governor was to provide more resources and support for our veterans as they transition into higher education, both at community college level, university, and trade skill level. So higher education, thank you. A shout out to our veterans and what we can do for them. Also on the Transportation Committee, and have been an author of and a supporter of 9 different bills that focus on investing $6 billion a year more in our transportation infrastructure without raising a single tax or fee. This is money that we are already sending to the state of California. It is our responsibility to spend it better. I'll give you one example. Vehicle weight fees. Trucks do more wear and tear on our roads, so they pay a vehicle weight fee. It's intended and was originated to put that money back into investing in our infrastructure. It's about $1 billion a year. How much do you think is put into infrastructure? Zero. $1 billion a year that is diverted into the general fund. And there's a lot of things in the general fund that might be good and appropriate to pay for, but when we say we're going to spend it on infrastructure and we don't, we better get it together. And so that's one example. There was also a study that came out from the Legislative Analyst's Office, an independent, nonpartisan source, which I value highly, and it said that Caltrans has 3,000 redundant jobs. And the number was 3,000. And even if we just reduced half of those, we would have more that we can put into our infrastructure. So I believe, again, in definitely our infrastructure needs that investment, but ensuring that we spend our dollars better before we try to take more out of our California citizens. Also on the Business and Professions Committee, which was mentioned, this is the committee that has oversight over every licensed business in California, including and from your barber or someone who may do your nails, all the way to your doctor or lawyer and CPA. And so I'm on this committee to really ensure I can be part of that pro-job economy and pro-job policy. Fortunately, it's a fairly bipartisan committee. And bipartisanship is how I roll. I am a lifelong Republican. And when you're a woman at my age in the Bay Area and you're a Republican, you're really committed to it. But I represent everyone. And I firmly believe in supporting good ideas regardless of who they come from and what their party registration was. And I've had a pretty strong streak of showing that in the Assembly. I have got a 100% score from the California Taxpayers Association, but also have found a way to support better spending policies that don't even involve taxes. And you don't always see that. Sometimes my colleagues only talk about taxes. We got to talk about spending reforms. So there's several areas in which I've had a more independent streak. I'm happy to talk about them. There's some of the most major bills that we had passed this year. But with that, I'm hearing a lot of my voice. So I thought I would take a pause and maybe just get right into opening up for questions. And you know what I'll do? I'll also give you a little heads up of what I see coming in the next year. And you're going to be the first one to get to ask a question, in case that was yours. I see a couple things that are definitely going to be coming down the pipeline in the next year. I do believe there will be additional tax increases proposed. There were $29 billion worth of tax increases proposed this last year, including split roll and a services industry tax instead of just a consumer goods tax. Removing the protections in Prop 13 for commercial property, as I talked about. A cocktail tax, that usually gets people pretty riled up. And every one of them stopped. You didn't see them in the headlines because I am there. When I won last year, my seat broke the 2/3 supermajority. And regardless of your party registration, when one party has that much control, 2/3 or more, whether it's Republicans in Congress or Democrats in the legislature, it's not good. And without the 2/3, those tax increases couldn't happen. And I was called into the Speaker's office and asked to vote for tax increases, and I said no. And so I do see more coming. The gas tax will probably come up, tobacco tax will come up again, and I do think that there will be more pushing on split roll and the Prop 30 tax increases and making them permanent. They're likely to be ballot initiatives because they're not going to get out of the legislature, at least with my vote, and that will be something that I see coming next year. I think there will be more efforts, I hope, to reach an agreement on transportation reform and investment, and I will keep pushing for that. I'm a little less hopeful on it because there's only reliance on getting new sources of revenue rather than some of the reforms I think we need to make. There may be discussion of the minimum wage again, minimum wage increase. And fortunately, the governor has signaled that he doesn't think that's appropriate right now. And when this governor, this is something I learned this year, when this governor signals something like that, he doesn't give many signals, sometimes that has enough to kill it. And I'm glad that he sees that that may not be the approach we need to take in California. So those are some of the things I see coming down the pipeline. I also imagine there's going to be some gun-related bills coming through, as well as a ballot initiative on that. And it's, I'm sure, going to be a very active year. So with that, I will finally take questions. Yes, sir, you had your arm up.
What's your thoughts on the train to nowhere?
I'll repeat the questions.
A lot of money being spent. It seems like there's some counties are fighting it again.
So what are my thoughts on the train to nowhere, otherwise affectionately known as the high-speed rail? And look, I strongly oppose the project. It is, when it was first passed, we were told it was going to be $30 billion. Right after it was passed, it tripled to over $100 billion. And there was a big brouhaha, so they reduced it to $70 billion. So now it's only double, more than double the original cost. And they did that by selecting a slower right-of-way and picking the contractor with the lowest safety rating. Ridership is expected to be 2/3 less than what was originally projected. Public money won't go anywhere near it. And it has operating deficits as far as the eye can see, which means once it's built, that's money that cannot go into other systems. And most transit systems, probably all of them, have an operating deficit. We should look at why, but the fact that they have a ballooned operating deficit forever should raise a concern. If there's a day for high-speed rail in the state, it is not this project. So I have fought to redirect those funds to other areas. I have supported putting high-speed rail money into water infrastructure, which we have not invested in over 25 years. I've also suggested we put it into a school facilities bond. School facilities, the building of new schools, like what we may need in the Tri-Valley, or maintaining our crumbling schools, like what we have in Lafayette and Orinda. They have 60-year-old schools there. Has traditionally been a state role of about 40% of the cost, and the state pays nothing now, and it says we all need to pay it locally. Well, we're already paying a significant amount. So I will tell you this, I will continue to fight and call for others to vote on high-speed rail. As long as Governor Brown is in the governor's mansion, it will happen. Because I've had colleagues, good colleagues on the other side of the aisle with whom I work very well, tell me privately, oh, I really can't stand this project, but they will not vote against it because either some do believe in it or the governor has made it clear, you vote for this, scaling it back, and I know what bills are yours. And as I said, people listen to him when he talks. Not every governor is treated that way in state legislatures, but when in his beginning of his first term, the second time around, he said, if you send me things, I will veto them. And they kept sending him certain things, and he did. So he stands by that. I will keep pressing on it, and at the least, I'd like to see it get back on the ballot for voters to be able to change it. But as long as he's there, it's there, and I vote for every opportunity to stop it. So, yes?
Are there some areas that are local areas you're saying that you can't come through here?
Yes, there's been quite a bit of debate. Are there areas near the high-speed rail that says you can't come through here? There's been a lot of discussion both about the eminent domain as it's being exercised, as well as the communities around it that don't like it, but it's going forward right now. It is really being rammed through. And it's unfortunate. I will tell you, I have a town hall almost every week or two, an open town hall, many people show up and ask any question, and every single time, regardless of the demographic of the town hall or where I have it, I get that question. And this district can see so many better investments in our infrastructure right here than high-speed rail. So I'm going to give us indigestion in the morning for that.
Hold on, we have a question over here.
Yeah.
Catherine, my name is Jim.
Jim.
I have a comment and then a question. I had one of your team members come to my home yesterday. It was the first time I've had a member of the legislature's team come to my home. It was pouring down rain. She was walking with an umbrella. She had an iPad with a questionnaire that was extraordinary. I mean, I really tip my hat to you for your involvement.
Well, I tip it to her for keeping up with that job of walking in the rain in the evening. But yes,
I would pay her more, whatever you're paying.
I will probably let her know you said that.
The question I have, and it's just because of being here for my entire life in California, when you're talking about your 4 pillars, do you have any confidence whatsoever that anything will change?
Great question. And I asked myself that question when I was sworn in a year ago, because I was sworn in as a member of the minority party, a freshman. I get to be my young age and a freshman again, which is very fun. And I'm a target, which means that I'm in a seat that, and your mailbox will continue to experience this, by the way, and I will apologize in advance. I'm in a seat that is not safely in one party's hands or the other's. It's a swing seat, which is pretty healthy. I think that makes people accountable if they're really working hard. And so there's a disincentive in Sacramento. Both parties have their target seats. Republicans have seats on the other side that they look at and like, well, these are the ones we'd really like to get. And so we don't want to help them. I'm just telling you what I've learned in Sacramento. Big surprise. And my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, no matter how well we work together, and we do, ultimately would like to have this seat back, particularly because it broke 2/3. So there's a temptation to not help target members' legislation happen. So I really wondered this year, okay, what am I going to be able to accomplish? Every member is able to introduce 40 bills. I don't recommend you do that. We really don't need that kind of generation of work. I introduced a few, and 4 of my bills came out unanimously voted on with bipartisan support, and all 4 were signed by the governor. And so that was good to see happen. They happen. and they're significant bills. The other thing I saw is that bipartisanship does work. You have to work really hard at it, and you have to have guts. And I, for example, this year was the only Republican in the Assembly to co-author the vaccine reform bill. I felt it was the right thing to do, and I was able to shape that bill to be better than its original bill. It was extremely controversial, but I had a major impact for the positive, I believe, making that bill better. And same thing with some other bills that had a significant impact on lives in California, where I might have been the only Republican of a few to be on there. Because if I felt it was a good idea, and I'm a straightforward person, and you get a reputation for that, you can have a major impact. So I'm hopeful. I certainly come away with a very positive feeling about that. The big areas where there are still major powers in play in Sacramento weighing in favor of one side, that challenge remains. And I'll just be candid about it. In education, we really need people who are independent from the traditional, very powerful interests that have kept education policy the same for decades. And I didn't articulate that in a partisan way because there are a few colleagues on the other side of the aisle who share my frustration and they work with me. But that is going to be a long-term process of education reform. We must do it. We must reform our teacher tenure system. That it is a disservice to our teachers who come up to me and say that, and it is a disservice to students, and it's a policy from the early part of the last century, when women could be fired if they got married or had children from their teaching careers. We already have lots of wrongful termination statutes in California. We need to reform tenure. We need to provide real professional development for teachers. We don't do that. We need greater accountability in our schools. We don't have that. And so those are the reforms that when I get up there and I see them die on party line votes or high-speed rail or other ones, it's a reminder that interests are still there that are very powerful. It makes my job all the more necessary that I continue to fight for that. Because we lose that one voice and you put into place another that just reinforces the status quo, we don't get anywhere. So it's a long-winded way of saying my experience is I'm very upbeat about what can be accomplished, but I know that for many of the most significant things, it is a long-term process and you must remain committed to it. Just have to. And imagine if we didn't engage, it would be 10 times worse. So I hope that gives you a sense. Yeah. Mike.
So thank you so much for being here and offering your time early in the morning to address a group of realtors.
I'm up here to do comedy jokes, by the way. I'm not sure that's my job. Thank you.
So one of the questions I have, because it affects all our business in the room, and that's a model that they use in the state of Florida on their property tax assessments, which kind of goes like this, where let's say you have a house that has an assessment of, like, say, $500,000, and your house is now worth $1 million. But you want to buy that house for $1.5 million. If you do that, you're going to be reassessed at $1.5 million. So what the model in Florida sort of does is says, okay, so you will keep your $500,000 in assessment, but you're going to do the full tax assessment on the difference between $1 million and the $1.5 million. So what that does, it increases the amount of upward mobility. It increases the amount of activity for us. But not just for us, but for all the related people that work in the industry. Have you heard about that? I mean, I know there are, at CAR, they're talking about that. They're talking about studies on that. Have you heard about that?
Well, I haven't. I'll just tell you that. I have not heard of what Florida does. I know that I'm intrigued, very intrigued by that, and we'll be looking into it. I know that anything that changes Prop 13 has to go on the ballot. It won't make it out, almost anything won't make it out of the Assembly. I'm not a big fan of governing by ballot. I feel like I've been sent there to do a job, study the issues, and make a call. And a short summary on a ballot doesn't accomplish that. I feel like it's a relinquishment of my job to always see things go on a ballot. But the reality is that's still where it's at. But I have not heard of that. It's very intriguing to me. I'd like to see how long they've been doing it, what effect it has had. And one thing you always think of when you see what other states do, is you have to understand California, what other tax burdens and policies they have that you're faced with. Somebody was mentioning to me Texas, we have low this, low that, and low other rates. They have really high property taxes. And that's because they don't have the same high income tax, corporate tax, gasoline tax, sales tax that California has. And so there's a whole mix involved that affects not only the value of your property, but your cost of living in your state. I would be very interested in learning more about that. Nick, my field representative, is out there, and he's taking notes to make sure that I get a chance to look into it. Thanks for letting me know. And I even need to know if this has been examined before in California. You have really good policy folks in Sacramento, by the way. And I've met with them, gone over to the offices, and you have folks who specialize in different areas, and they're very responsive when we call up and say, where are you on this? Tell me what your expertise is. They're extremely responsive. So I appreciate whatever you do to, I'm not putting a pitch in to pay more fees up there, I don't want you to tell that. But there are some hardworking people at CAR who, on the policy side, are very, very good. And I'll look forward to visiting with them about it. Thank you. Yeah,
One last quick comment, and that is, at Legislative Day, we had a group of issues that were very important to the realtor community, and I wanted to congratulate Catherine for supporting all of those that we needed to have our support on, because we need advocates in Sacramento that listen to organized real estate, and thank you so much.
thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate the input too. Yes?
Catherine, thank you for coming. I'm going to ask you, I think the toughest question of our time is, let's talk about mass shootings here for a second.
Okay.
I have no confidence that Washington's going to do anything to try to prevent these in the future.
Yeah.
What is in the works in the state of California to try to prevent these future kind of mass shootings we've seen, and what are your thoughts on that area?
So I can tell you what we have traditionally done in California, some of which we've heard in the debates in the last several days from the most recent tragedy, which is horrible. You know, I grew up down very close to San Bernardino, and I just look around our community, what would happen if I woke up one day and found this happening in our own town? And traditionally, California has primarily focused on guns and types of guns that are banned or have restrictions on them. And I'm not speaking just in terms of, are you a member of this organization or that. I'm just telling you what California has traditionally done. We do have some of the strictest gun control laws in the country. And I can tell you what my belief is, that's not working to stop people who should not have guns in their hands and who are likely to do harm to other people. It is not enough. I personally look at a couple different areas in the work that I do, and that's probably what I can speak most about. The first is, and my philosophy is this, we should focus on what can we do to keep firearms out of the hands of those who are likely to do harm to others. That's where we need to put our public safety dollars, that's where we need to put our law enforcement support, and my belief is just banning a style of a firearm is unsuccessful. One example is this. You can have two neighbors right next to each other, one who's allowed to have the firearm, one who is not, based on when they bought it and if the ban was in place. Nothing to do with who's more likely to do harm to someone. To me, that is a poor way of enforcing and trying to promote firearm safety. So that's the first thing, and I meet with our law enforcement and our DAs to ask them what are the things that help you, and they would like to see more focus on how they can keep the guns out of the criminals' hands and those who have mental disabilities of some kind or another. And that's what I focus on. I'll give you an example. Let's get this really core specific. Prop 47 was passed last year on our ballot. It was sold to us, I did not vote for it, it was sold to us as, let's keep low offense criminals out of our jail system and try to rehabilitate them and get them, out of our crowded jails. It's better to do it that way. What it did is it made things that were previously a felony a misdemeanor, and people get released. So one of the things it did is it affected guns. Originally, if you are in possession of a firearm that is stolen, it is a felony. What Prop 47, and you go to jail. A felony means you're in jail for a year or more. And you cannot have a firearm ever again. What Prop 47 did is say, if you have a firearm that is stolen, but it's less than $950 in value, it's a misdemeanor. And that is not something people knew was in there. I knew it was in there. And to me, that's an example. If you're in possession of a stolen firearm, you're the person we should be focusing on. And we do things like that. So what I'm trying to do is find those statutes, those policies we already have that are keeping us from getting hands out of those who have more difficulties. A second area absolutely is in the area of mental health. I don't know that what happened if you shoot people, I think you have a mental problem. Usually, if there's someone who has criminal tendencies, they might not have, traditionally, and a gang member might not, they're just bad. We're still figuring out what happened in San Bernardino, for sure. But there's no question that there are shootings that happen from folks who have a mental incapacity. Our state has a shortage of mental health professionals. One of my 4 bills was to address that. It was to make sure we can get more psychologists licensed more quickly. We had a terrible red tape process with a silly licensing timeline, and I fixed that by streamlining it a bit. So I look for things like that. And I can just tell you, it is very easy, and it has a cosmetic appeal to it to say, we're just gonna ban more style of guns. 2 things happen. They change the style just a little bit, and that gun is legal, but not another one. As the example I gave you, has nothing to do with someone's tendency to cause harm. And that's what I would like to focus on. That is my approach. I know, just so you can see what's coming down the pipeline, I fully expect in January to see bills introduced in this area. I hope you'll see what lens I will be looking through as I approach them. It won't be, does the NRA support it or not? I happen to be a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, but I am supportive of reasonable gun regulations. Increase background checks. Close every loophole there is on a background check. But I want to tell you something. The folks in San Bernardino, we have learned, had all these pipe bombs and all these other things. They were hell-bent on killing people, with or without guns. They had handguns as well as assault weapons. So one or the other is still going to get in someone's hands. What can we do to keep them out of their hands? So, and I appreciate thoughtful dialogue about it and ideas, and I'll listen to every good one there is, so these things never happen. But that is an excellent question. I thought it was going to be a much tougher question about elections or politics, but this goes to the core of what's happening in our state. I see that I might be getting the hook, I'm not sure. But I do want to say a couple things in closing. The first is, your input really is valuable to me. You have a great team in Sacramento, but you are in our community here. And you'll find that I do pick up the phone and call and ask how would this affect you? I talk to Bay East as well as Contra Costa Realtors because they're both in my district. And I get great responsiveness and I appreciate it. Keep it coming. I'm gonna have at the table 3 things for you. The first is my business card. It has my email on it, it has our office locations. Please contact me if you or the people you work with are expressing a need or interest. It doesn't have to be about your professional capacity, it can be anything you care about. The second is a brochure on what our office can do for you and your clients. And it's got all the phone numbers and everything. It even has a tear-out card of mine and even a way to provide input. That person who came with the tablet to the door, that information I use. I get that and I read it on my Friday and Saturday nights. It's very exciting stuff. And that's how I know what I'm hearing in my community. The final one is an invitation to a party. You guys know how to party. And I have a holiday open house at my district office in Bishop Ranch. I want to welcome you. Please come, bring your families. Network, I certainly encourage that, and it's a wonderful open house. We get a great packed crowd, and we do have a Toys for Tots drive, so bring an unwrapped toy if you can, and be delighted to have that. And the final one, those will be 3 things at the table. I have different roundtables of different industry groups in my district. One for insurance industry, one for people of different cultural backgrounds, small business leaders. I also, starting at the beginning of the year, will have a realtors roundtable. And I'm going to be reaching out to Bay East and any of you here who would like to be involved. What we do is we meet for about 90 minutes and I don't talk, you'll be pleased to know. It's me to listen. What are the issues you want me to be working on and what are the ones that your clients and people that you work for are addressing? And there's no media, it's not a big published event, it's really to get to the core of what I should be working on. Very, very valuable. That'll be coming up in the first quarter of next year, and we probably meet twice a year. So thank you very much for the wonderful hospitality and the work that you do. I appreciate it. Thank you.